Thanks for joining us for CBN NewsWatch. I'm Efrem Graham. Here are some of the big headlines we're following for you in the CBN newsroom today. President Trump says he is open to having talks with North Korea, at least until the appropriate time. The president spoke with South Korea's president Wednesday, 2 days after the North and South participated in high-level talks. He thanked President Trump for making the talks possible. Also in Washington today, lawmakers are increasingly close to forging a deal to protect the nearly 800,000 Dreamers. Congress could have an agreement as early as January 19th. Growing outrage after a Louisiana teacher questioned whether a superintendent should receive a raise at a school board meeting. She was ushered out of that meeting and arrested, and the entire incident was caught on camera. The Vermilion Parish teacher asked why a superintendent was receiving a $30,000 raise while teachers had not received a pay increase in about 10 years. She will not face charges. The final headline we want to pass along to you. Some people are buying the wrong Fire and Fury book. Instead of purchasing Michael Wolff's book on the Trump administration, people are picking up a book by Canadian author Randall Hansen. But this Toronto professor is not complaining. According to the New York Daily News, his book is now a bestseller. We'll have more on some of these stories later in the show. First, hundreds are still trapped without power or electricity near Santa Barbara, California. Heavy rains and flash floods caused massive mudslides and devastated the area. Emergency crews are going door to door looking for survivors. George Thomas has this story.
2 days in,
Josie!
The frantic search for survivors continues.
Why did she go downstairs?
Day and night, hundreds of emergency workers, friends and family are trudging through mud looking for people amidst the destruction.
I would say it's apocalyptic.
Robert Ruskin has been searching for his mom for over 48 hours.
You know, it's my mom and I'm fighting with all my heart to find her, but I can't focus too much on she's most likely dead out here, and just push my way through.
The mud and debris buried hundreds of homes so deep that in some places only the chimneys are visible.
This is how deep the mud is.
Oprah Winfrey posting this video on Instagram of the destruction around her home.
My neighbor's house, devastated.
Oh my God, Mom!
The flash flood struck in the early morning hours Tuesday. Marco Farrow captured the frightening moment.
Close the door! Get ready to go out. Wake Dad up.
We sheltered in place in a hallway towards the back of the house.
A huge amount of rain fell in a matter of minutes on hills and mountain slopes scorched by last month's massive California wildfire. There was nothing left on the land to stop the wall of water, as new video shows the mudslide's power and speed.
86/100ths of an inch in 15 minutes is an unprecedented rainfall on any ground surface, much less a fire-burned watershed.
The death toll early today stood at 17. Another 17 are still missing around the town of Montecito in Santa Barbara County, where hundreds of people are still surrounded by more than a foot of mud. At least 400 homes are damaged or destroyed. George Thomas, CBN News.
Nearly 800,000 DACA recipients known as the Dreamers fear deportation if Congress can't fix that program that protects them. Abigail Robertson is following the negotiations going on right now in Washington.
Hundreds of DACA recipients came to Washington this week to push lawmakers of both parties to reach a permanent solution for Dreamers before it's too late.
It's scary, but you still have to plan. How am I going to pay rent? How am I going to make sure that I am having meals a day? How am I going to drive?
Maria Preelli came to the United States when she was 5 years old. Her sister had been badly injured, and their mother believed America would provide better medical treatment than Peru. The family overstayed their visa and settled near relatives in Connecticut.
And when you're 5 years old, you don't really understand what's going on, much less what immigration policy is like.
Then in high school, Maria began to understand life as an undocumented immigrant.
I always knew that things were different. My mom would always tense up when a police officer would drive by, and I knew things were harder for us. But I didn't really understand what being undocumented would mean for me. I was really mad because I had grown up in the U.S., I had pledged allegiance every day, I felt American.
Through the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals program, or DACA, Maria's been able to get a license, employment, and pursue education. That could end soon, however, because Maria's status expires next month. She's requested a final 2 years of protection, but doesn't know if her request has been approved.
Someone like myself sent in her renewal months in advance, but I still have to plan to not have anything.
Dreamers did receive a possible lifeline on Tuesday when a U.S. district judge put the DACA phase-out on hold, a move the White House calls outrageous. The ruling allows legal challenges to ending the program to proceed, which could stretch beyond the March deadline. Meanwhile, lawmakers from both parties are trying to protect the Dreamers, but negotiations are complicated because of other issues being added to the bill. President Trump brought congressional leaders to the White House this week to push for a compromise that would address DACA, as well as border security, chain migration, and the visa lottery program.
But the hope is to move the debate from differences to decision.
Senator James Lankford told CBN News lawmakers need to act now if they're going to protect the Dreamers going forward.
The deadline is the first week of March, but that's implementation deadline. So that means you've got to be able to get the law passed early enough that you can actually do implementation in time. The challenge still remains to be able to get everybody on the same bill and to say this is the exact language we're going to get it resolved.
President Trump says one thing both parties have in common is that they want to see DACA settled once and for all. Reporting from Capitol Hill, Abigail Robertson, CBN News.
Michael Wolff's book, Fire and Fury Inside the Trump White House, has lived up to its title. It is bringing fire to the former chief strategist Steve Bannon and eliciting fury from the president. Amber Strong has this update.
Reporter Michael Wolff's book, Fire and Fury Inside the Trump White House, has lived up to its title, bringing fire to former chief strategist Steve Bannon and eliciting fury from the president. I've had to put up with the fake news from the first day I announced I'd be running for president. Now I have to put up with a fake book, Trump tweeted. So what's in the book? Wolff paints a story of a White House in disarray, pointing to members of the administration openly questioning the president's ability and mental fitness.
The people in the White House are like everybody else in the country. What's going to happen here? We don't know from day to day.
Chief strategist Steve Bannon is the star of the book. Wolff details conversations in which he claims Bannon questioned Donald Trump Jr., Jared Kushner, and Paul Manafort's decision to meet with a Russian attorney during the campaign. Bannon is quoted as saying the meeting was, quote, treasonous and unpatriotic. Wolff gathered some of his accounts by simply sitting in the White House and listening. He says members of the administration, including the president, failed to say their comments were off the record.
We would speak. I'm sure he didn't think they were interviews.
This isn't the first time that's happened. Remember Anthony Scaramucci's comments to The New Yorker? Wolff admits he didn't speak with the vice president or members of the cabinet before writing the book. President Trump slammed the work and threatened legal action.
I think furious, disgusted would probably certainly fit when you make such outrageous claims and completely false claims against the president, his administration, and his family.
Bannon has since issued an apology of sorts, telling Axios, quote, Donald Trump Jr. is both a patriot and a good man, and his remarks were aimed toward Manafort. Fellow journalists are questioning some inaccurate details in the book and Wolff's use of all-inclusive statements.
I believe parts of it, and then there are other parts that are factually wrong.
Like the claim the president didn't know who former House Speaker John Boehner was, or that 100% of the president's family members question if he's fit for office. Regardless of the president's fury and questions from the media, the book equals money in the bank for Wolff. Orders of Fire and Fury are backlogged. Amber Strong, CBN News, Washington.
Still ahead, in public schools across Canada, students may soon learn about the 3 R's and the countless possible genders. Learn more about this radical sex ed curriculum next. Houston tops an ugly list. The Justice Department reports that Texas City is one of the country's largest hubs for human trafficking, and the problem is simply too big for police to tackle alone. So Christian organizations are stepping up to shine a light on the problem and to shelter the victims.
A night drive on the streets of Houston shines a bright light on a big problem. Ship Channel area is a huge hotspot. The Galleria area, just south of the actual Galleria, is probably the epicenter for human trafficking.
Adam Cheney works with Elijah Rising. The ministry has rescued at least a dozen victims and directs bus tours to show Houston area residents the hot spots for sex trafficking. It's identified 300 suspected locations.
The I-10 corridor here has been labeled as probably the #1 human trafficking corridor in the nation.
Some hotspots look like spas, but are actually brothels, selling enslaved girls for sex.
I wouldn't say the living condition of a dog, because you do take your dog out once or twice a day.
Ohad Shahul is a former human trafficking bodyguard.
They get sold 10 times a day on a good day. On a bad day, they'll be sold like 20 or 30 times a day.
Victims include women smuggled from Southeast Asia, South America, and Mexico. But that's not all. There are an estimated 6,000 children on the streets of Houston on any given night, all runaways. That number has helped the city to earn the unwanted distinction of being one of the most intense areas in the country for child sex trafficking.
It's an alarming problem. I mean, I think that for me as a social worker who's been doing this for years and years and years, I was totally unaware that our city was a hub of trafficking.
Kelly Armstrong is with Arrow Child and Family Ministries. The organization started Freedom Place. This is a safe house for girls rescued from human trafficking. And volunteers from Houston area churches united to refurbish and furnish every inch of it.
I mean, it's just ask and it will be given, and given abundantly. And that's what we have experienced. I mean, everything in this home has really been donated.
Armstrong calls this farm and its services a place for girls to hide, heal, and find hope for their future. January, by the way, has been dubbed Trafficking Awareness Month. You can learn more about the issue and what faith leaders are doing to fight the problem at cbnnews.com. In Canada, the fight is over a radical sex ed curriculum being pushed in public schools by the LGBT advocates. Many parents fear their children will become confused and even brain issues, while supporters claim it's about allowing students to be their true selves. As Wendy Griffith discovered, it could be an issue that wakes up a sleeping church in Canada.
A family can be made up in many different ways.
It's called SOGI, for Sexual Orientation and Gender Identification, a curriculum that teaches public school students across Canada to celebrate the homosexual lifestyle and that gender is fluid. In other words, your gender is not dependent on what parts you were born with, but rather what you feel like in the moment.
There's people that are boys, there's people that are girls, there are people whose gender might be a little bit of both, or might even be neither.
Lessons include books about transgender children, such as 10,000 Dresses, and songs like The Rainbow Song.
Gender won't decide the choices we make. Some boys like dressing up, some girls like catching snakes.
The SOGI curriculum started in British Columbia in 2016 and is quickly spreading throughout Canada.
I just thought, who decided that this was okay to teach our children?
Author and inspirational speaker Laura Lynn Tyler Thompson is a leading voice against the SOGI curriculum.
And we are seeing the results of that now, because some kids are reacting very emotionally and saying, and they're in fear. Will I suddenly struggle with feeling like a different gender inside of my body?
Carrie Simpson of Culture Guard, another leading opponent, calls the curriculum nothing short of child abuse.
All those beautiful qualities that make young girls, beautiful girls and women, are being basically vilified. The things that make our boys boys are being, taken from them. So things of equating young men to being strong protectors is something that's now evil.
But Morgan Auger, a transsexual and supporter, claims it's about acceptance, not indoctrination.
The idea is to teach kids that there are gay kids and there are trans kids and there are trans parents and gay parents in our society, and everybody's wanted and desired. After all, that's what our Human Rights Code says, and it's the role of schools to teach the following of our laws, right?
Simpson disagrees, saying she sees Soji's real goal as
altering our culture from a heteronormative society into one where anything goes, no boundaries, no values, no morals. It's a hedonistic cult, basically, what they're implying.
Another blaring example, drag queen story time. It's happening in Canada and America, where some public schools and libraries invite drag queens, some dressed like horned demons, to read to young children.
And it's a social deconstructionist agenda. They're using children, little 5-year-olds, to accomplish this. And parents are waking up and saying no.
When asked about parents' rights, Auger says,
well, actually, in Canada, parents' rights are limited and children's rights are put ahead. So the child has the right to be protected from the parents when the parents behave badly.
Canada is known as one of the most gay-friendly countries in the world, with many of their largest cities featuring their own gay villages, like here in Vancouver, which has literally rolled out the Rainbow Road.
Most gays, like village resident Dave Davy DiCarlo, support Soji and limiting parental rights.
The change that we have to see is sometimes the parents. And the kids are doing actually really okay.
This is very scary stuff.
Longtime Vancouver area pastor Kevin Kavanaugh says this is far more serious than most Canadian Christians realize.
Our problem is not the teachers, the educators, the administrators. This is a battle in the heavenlies.
He says Satan is going after their most vulnerable, the children.
And the little girl came home in tears because the teacher had told her, since she was playing with some toys in the class that were deemed to be masculine in nature, that she was likely a boy in a girl's body. The mother went to the school the very next day, and instead of having any sort of tolerance or support or understanding, she was actually called names. She was told that she was a homophobe, that she was a bigot.
With that in mind, Tyler Thompson, Simpson, and Pastor Kevin are spreading their message across social media and in town hall meetings. The pro-gay backlash has been fierce.
And the hatred and the anger and the bullying that came against us, even though we said, we love you, we don't take from you the opportunity and the freedom to live as you choose. We love you, but we do not agree with you.
Pastor Kevin believes Canadian Christians are in a 2 Chronicles 20 moment.
The word was this battle is not yours, Jehoshaphat. This battle is the Lord's.
And the church is beginning to prepare for what it takes to fight for our kids.
The battle between an aggressive homosexual agenda and the faith community here in Canada is far from over. But many Christian leaders say it may be the issue that causes a once sleeping church to rise up and be heard. Wendy Griffith, CBN News, Vancouver.
We're going to show you the most dangerous places in the world for Christians and what's being done to protect the persecuted when CBN NewsWatch returns. There's a list out naming the 50 most dangerous countries for Christians. Muslim nations dominate the top 10 on the list, but the #1 spot, Paul Strand went to the National Press Club to find out who holds that dubious distinction.
Some folks may think civilization is on the rise, but religious freedom certainly isn't. In the world right now, some 250 million Christians face persecution. That means 1 out of 12 face some sort of danger where they live just because of their faith.
Every year, the anti-persecution group Open Doors puts out the World Watch List, subtitling it this year, the 50 countries where it's most dangerous to follow Jesus. Open Doors president blasted #1 on the list North Korea and its dictator Kim Jong-un.
Imagine in your mind a leader who thinks he is God, but acts like an animal, devouring his own people.
David Curry blames Islamic extremists for some of the world's worst abuses, especially against women.
We found 2,260 women who were forced into marriage, who were raped, who had sexual assault by Muslim extremists.
An international advocate for religious freedom said it's important to remember the persecuted, like an American pastor held in a Turkish prison.
I met with Pastor Andrew Brunson in Turkey earlier this year, and his biggest fear is to be forgotten.
A top congressional fighter for religious freedom said the U.S. does big business with many of these persecuting nations.
A lot of these are
countries that we have billion-dollar agreements with. And certainly I think it's important to know that when we are sending taxpayer dollars to some of these countries that we know what is going on.
Curry started this news conference by dedicating it to a 47-year-old nun who faced death threats for working in Jesus' name with the poorest people in India.
Two Hindu extremists came to her medical clinic, attacked her, raped her, drugged her, and left her unconscious, tied to a bed.
He asked American Christians to pray for people like this persecuted nun every Sunday and push for justice.
That seems so obvious, but until the voice and the heart of the American church is heard on this subject, I don't think much will be done.
They say one thing Congress could do is halt the months-long holdup of Kansas Governor Sam Brownback's appointment as ambassador-at-large for international freedom.
The people who suffer are people around the world who do not have a voice and cannot have a voice because people who should be their voice are not there for them.
We need a point person. This is not a partisan issue. Democrat or Republican, independent, you need to care about the religious liberty of others.
Persecution of Christians is on the rise. We cannot turn a blind eye to this evil, and the United States must continue to hold our friends and our enemies accountable.
For those who think nothing can be done about this, well, our government can certainly do more financially, and believers can do something prayerfully for their brethren persecuted around the world. Paul Strand, CBN News, Washington.
Thank you, Paul. Sound the alarm and pray and then take action. We'll be right back. Time now for your Thursday Thankful, and today I hope you'll join me in this prayer of gratitude. It is a simple prayer. Father, I bow my head to say thanks for the breath of life. I may not be where I want to be or have all that I wish I had, but if all I have is Jesus, Jesus is all I need. With that word, be sure to make this a thankful day. No matter how many hours or minutes remain in the day, spend that time being grateful. That is going to do it for this edition of CBN NewsWatch. Remember, you can find more of our exclusive coverage of the issues you care most about, always at cbnnews.com. Hope you'll join us again right here next time. Make this a thankful Thursday. We'll see you back here tomorrow.